okay? The sheet with the big margin at the bottom, that's this one. Okay, the sheet with the big margin at the bottom.
I'm just reading, obviously, a Goyish website. Right?
No, it's not it's Google Earth.
But it says Tomb of the Virgin, Chapel of the Ascension.
Yes, well, I mean, there are actually places that are called that, all right? So just to get your bearings, on the left, underneath the Google search box, is Har Habayit. You see there's a bird's eye view of the Temple Mount and the mosque, unfortunately, but that's what's there, okay? If you take your finger and put it on top of the mosque and move it right across the page, keep going all the way almost over to the next to the end, you'll come to the Mount of Olives. Okay, you see it, it's underneath the Chapel of the Ascensions, whatever that means. Okay, so you can see how it is directly east, that Har Hazeitim is directly east of Har Habayit. Okay, you see that? Now remember, we learned last week that the Para Aduma was burned. Well, first of all, it was slaughtered on Har Hazeitim, right? So and the Kohen at the time of the slaughtering needed to visualize the entryway to the Ulam, to the place where the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodashim was. Now it's time for sheet number 2. Sheet number 2 has the white margin on the right, okay? Good. Okay. Now, I want you just to get the same perspective here. So turn it so that the big margin is at the top. And put it next to, is that right? Hold on a second.
Oh, I see. You can match up the curved dirt here, this spot.
Yes, correct. You can match up you can actually see,
And then
if you're looking at the picture with the Beit HaMikdash there,
have this.
okay, look to the right of it. You see that road? Right, you see that road? And if you look on the other map, you'll see there's a road also that goes through the mount. That's like a cliff, right? The Har Hazeitim is a mountain range, right? It's called the Olive Mountain Range.
Is that stone? Is that all made out of rocks?
That's stone there,
Right.
okay? That's stone there. So if you look and you see Har Habayit, so if you're looking from the left and you're looking at the Beit HaMikdash, that's sort of where the Kotel is. Right? That's sort of where the Kotel is. Actually, I'll show you more where the Kotel is. But that's the direction that you're looking at. If you would go all the way, so if you sort of maintain that direction, you go up to the east, sort of northeast a little bit because the map is slanted, that's where Har Hazeitim is. Okay, so just,
The miniature city or something?
no, it's not a miniature city.
But this picture is.
Which one? This is a real picture of Yerushalayim, just with a Beit HaMikdash superimposed.
I was wondering.
Right. That's what Im Yirtzeh Hashem it will look like Bimheira V'Yameinu. Okay. Now turn it back so that it's a little bit easier to see. Turn it back with the big margin on the left. So you see the Beit HaMikdash, right? So if you put your finger on the Beit HaMikdash, go down to where like the wall would be and go to your right, you'll see the Kotel. Okay, put your finger on the Beit HaMikdash, go down a little bit, just until the Beit HaMikdash is uncovered, and then move it to the right, and you'll see there's like an opening there. That's the Kotel. Just so you get a sense of how big the wall,
Actually was.
the retaining wall actually was, and how small the Kotel. Do you see it? Here's the Kotel.
Well, it's just a remnant.
Here's the Kotel right here.
Yeah, okay, yeah, got it.
All right. So just so you see how small the Kotel is, in comparison to how big the retaining wall of Har Habayit really was. Remember, the Kotel is not the wall of the Beit HaMikdash. It's the wall, retaining wall of Har Habayit.
So is it correct for us to treat it so holy?
Yes, of course. I mean, what's the
All we
question?
have.
It is, I mean, Thelma is actually asking a very interesting question, which is, what is the level of Kedusha of the Kotel? Is it to be considered like, the actual Har Habayit itself, or not? I mean, so for instance, if you were to, on any given day, to stand in a place where you could look down on Har Habayit, you would see all kinds of people walking around in all kinds of areas of Har Habayit, right? Now, if you're observant, that's not something you can do. So the same thing by the Kotel. People are doing all kinds of things right in front of the Kotel, hugging the Kotel, kissing the, right? Finding crevices for notes and everything else. Is that something that an observant person should do? How should an observant person treat the Kotel? That's really the question that Thelma is asking. If it is really only a retaining wall, so then what Kedusha does it have? So the question is, when we define Har Habayit, is Har Habayit defined by the actual mountain, or is Har Habayit defined as extending through the wall that supports the mountain? Right. Which would make a claim for not putting a note into the Kotel. That a person should not put a note into the Kotel, because according to some, putting a note in the Kotel is putting your finger into Har Habayit, in which case you need to go to the mikvah before you could do that. Right? You would need to go to the mikvah before you could put your finger into Har Habayit, which is something which is certainly feasible to do. But that would be the stringent position regarding the Kedusha of Har Habayit. In other words, these stones themselves, they don't have any Kedusha, and they were built there by Herod, right? He was
But
by Herod, right? Herod, right? Who was,
also he did
not necessarily, I mean, a friend, but not necessarily a friend.
he also did Masada. He also did.
And right, and what we have here is those are they're not holy stones. They're not Beis Hamikdash stones, but nevertheless, since it's the wall around the Beis Hamikdash, it has a certain kedusha to it. Labriut. In fact, the Midrash tells us that Hashem will never allow that western wall, the entire western wall, to be destroyed. Right? That all the other walls would be destroyed, but that entire western wall would never be destroyed. But just so you have a sense, just a perspective of where the ceremony of the Para Aduma took place. Brent.
What's the opinion on Fitzels and altogether? I mean, is it? I don't know.
In other words,
For me, it's very difficult. I don't know. Maybe I've done it, but I certainly haven't done it recently because I'm just not comfortable with it.
well,
You know, I
in
don't
other
know.
words, are you asking me if it's mutter or usser?
Well, okay, Mutter Aser is one, and
Look.
then afterwards, how do we believe that a note is getting closer to God than my thought? Why do I have to write to God? I don't to God. Why do I have to write Fitzels with God? That's what I'm saying.
How about that they're
That's the
cleaned up
question.
every year?
Right, correct.
Most people don't know that.
But most people don't know that they're swept out and thrown away.
No, I think they bury them. No, they don't bury them either.
Why would they bury him?
They're not
I don't
holy.
know.
It's
No,
not
no,
holy.
no.
People write Hebrew, and then you don't even have
I
to be
think
Jewish
it's
to put it
people
in.
need.
Of course.
Yeah, so that's the question.
Right. So the question, so if you're asking me if it's usser, I don't think that it's usser. If you're asking me if it's necessary, I don't think that it's necessary. You have a similar thing. Those of you who have ever been to the Ohel, to the kever of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So what do people do? They write notes, and they throw them into.
They tear them first.
Correct, and they throw them into where the grave actually is, right? The idea is sort of like now the Rebbe will know what you want, and will daven for you, so to speak. So again, is that necessary? Is it certainly according to Chabad, it's necessary, and it's a good thing to do. And the truth be told, I would hedge my bets. In other words, if I would, okay, maybe they're right. I don't know. I would hedge my bets.
Well, that's at the kever, but don't we learn that you're not supposed to like dive into a dead person?
Nobody's davening to the Rebbe, right? They're asking the Rebbe to intercede in right? It's the same. Listen, when you go to the cemetery to visit family, right? You're not going there to daven to your relatives. You're not going there to even say hello to your relatives. You're going there to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the merit of these people, right? In the merit of these people and what they've accomplished in life, and hear my tefillos. That's what you're doing, right? That's what you're doing. So yeah.
I think it's more for the person who's writing it and putting it in, that it's a tangible manifestation of what they're doing, another sense that's being
Right.
used.
But I think Brenda's asking, is it usher? I don't think it's usher. Is it necessary? I don't think it's necessary. That's okay. Page 838. Now that we have our geography out of the way, page 838. So what we see we're going to look at Pasuk today at Pasuk Dalid. We know that last week we learned that the Para Aduma was taken out of it was the ceremony for the Para Aduma was done outside of the Beis Hamikdash in this place on Har HaZeisim. One element that we will see further is there was actually a pit that was dug, right? A pit that was dug on Har HaZeisim that faced exactly east of the Har Habayis, and in which the ceremony of the Para Aduma took place. In this, it's called a gat, Gimel Tov, right? In this gat, which is like a gat traditionally means a cistern. But here it wasn't a cistern, but it was a pit that was dug into the ground, and everything was contained within that pit, and that's where the Para Aduma was slaughtered. Now we know the Para Aduma could be slaughtered by even a non-Kohen. The Para Aduma did not need to be slaughtered by a Kohen. Even a non-Kohen could slaughter the Para Aduma, but it needed to be done in the presence of the Kohen. In this case of the first Para Aduma, in the presence of Elazar. That's where it had to be done. And that we learned that from the phrase, V'shachat osa lifanav. Right, that it needed to be slaughtered lifanav. What does lifanav mean? Before Elazar. Before Elazar, meaning he had to watch this slaughter taking place. It had to take place under his supervision, under his hashgacha, if you will. And it had to be in a place, and the slaughterer had to face Yerushalayim, Har Habayis, the entryway, the Pesach, the doorway into the Ohel, into the Ulam. That's what had to be done. Now, Pasuk Daled, V'lakach Elazar HaKohen midama be'etzba'o. Okay, any time that a karban was slaughtered, the blood of the karban needed to be collected into a kli, into a utensil. They had special utensils, right? Special kalim. Is utensil the right word for it? Special, bowls, right? Whatever, into which the blood was collected. Now, what happens? What happens today in a slaughterhouse? What happens after you shech the animal? What happens? The animal is literally hanging upside down, right? The reason the animal is hanging upside down is so that the blood will drain out of the animal through the place where you do the shechita. The shechita severs the main arteries that run in the neck of the animal, right? And the blood gushes out of that animal, right? And it is, some of it is absorbed into the floor, but most of it is channeled away. And there's no sanctity at all to that blood. The blood is just disposed of, right? The blood is washed away and disposed of, okay? However, the blood of a carbon needed to be captured because it was often used as part of the ritual of bringing a carbon. Now, we're all familiar with this, whether you know it or not, from Musaf on Yom Kippurim, right? Musaf on Yom Kippurim, it's a point during the davening where we're fading maybe a little bit, we're sort of just settling in, getting a little bit comfortable, I don't know. But there's a point in Musaf of Yom Kippurim where the Shliach Tzibur recites the avoda, right? Recites exactly what was done. Now, we usually say it to ourselves quietly. I know that in our shul we give introductions to the various sections. We explain what's going on to try to keep people's attention at that point. But then there are certain things where everybody stands up, and there are certain phrases where some people in the shul will bow down, literally lie down on the floor, because that's what they used to do in the Beis Hamikdash when they heard the name of Hashem that was never pronounced other than on Yom Kippurim by the Kohen Gadol. When they heard the name of Hashem pronounced, so then people would lie down on the floor.
Bow down.
No, flat on the floor. Right? We bow down during Aleinu there are people who bow down on the floor Aleinu, but that's not flat. Right? We just bow down, we're sort of on our knees. But when it comes to what the Kohanim, when the Kohen Gadol would mention Hashem's name, we actually lie flat on the floor. Which is a whole issue, a whole separate discussion. But after we lie on the floor, after we go through this thing, there's a continuation of this where the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, generally sings a section that says, achas v'achas, achas ushtayim, ring a bell, right? Achas v'shalosh, and everybody's singing achas ushtayim. What is that? What is that achas? What is that achas v'shnayim? What is that referring to? It's referring to the sprinkling of the blood. Right, right. You might not do it now. I'm not sure. Right, but it's referring to the sprinkling of the blood that the Kohen used to do from the sacrifices that were brought. Remember, the Kohen that day of Yom Kippurim brought multiple sacrifices, and he would sprinkle the blood. Right, the Kohen was sprinkling the blood towards the paroches, but sometimes the blood was sprinkled on the mizbeach. Right, on the outside, on the mizbeach, and the achas is he would sprinkle up once, achas, and down once, achas va'achas, achas ushtayim, achas v'shalosh. Right. In other words, this is how he had to sprinkle up once, and he had to sprinkle down 7 times, and that was how he kept track of it. And we are saying that because we're sort of re-experiencing this avoda on Yom Kippurim. So that's the sprinkling of the blood that you're all familiar with, right? Whether you realized it or not, that's the sprinkling of the blood. And a carbon often involved sprinkling of the blood. The blood had a certain holiness to it, a kedusha to it, and it had to be sprinkled. What about the leftover blood? Let's say, all right, an animal, there's a lot of blood, right? So you capture the blood in this, silver bowl, right? And it has to be. There's actually a Kohen whose job it is to keep the bowl moving because otherwise the blood will start to congeal. Right? Otherwise the blood will start. It's not a pleasant topic. That's why, sorry, but right. It's before lunch, so right. So there's blood left over. So right. I mean, how much sprinkling can you do? Right. There's blood left over. What happens to the blood that's left over? There was actually a system of channels in the Mizbeach where the blood would be poured and it would get absorbed into the earth that was underneath the Beis Hamikdash, right? The earth of the mountain on which the Beis Hamikdash was built. There were channels and the blood would get absorbed there. And actually the Mishnah talks about what happens. The channels had to be cleaned out and how they do that. It was fascinating stuff. For me, fascinating stuff. Okay, so right, so this idea of sprinkling of the blood is not new to the Para Aduma. we have sprinkling of the blood that we read about often when we talk about karbanos. You remember we read not so long ago about the mitzora, the person who had saras, right? Last week, Tazria mitzora, in the process of tahara, when the mitzora would go from a state of ritual impurity to purity, in other words, at the end. So what happened? He had to be sprinkled with the blood. It wasn't done with the finger at that point, but it had to be sprinkled with the blood. So the sprinkling idea is not unique to the paraduma. What does it mean? Why are we sprinkling with blood? What is going on here? So the simple answer is, I don't know. It's a chok, right? It's a law that we're given, and we don't really understand it. It actually is one of the more difficult elements of karbanos for us to grapple with. First of all, people sometimes have a normal aversion to blood, just whatever, right? Secondly, as Jews, we are conditioned against blood. In other words, we know we can't eat blood. We have to eat meat which has been kasher. The whole point of kashering the meat is to draw the blood out of the meat. Right? I remember growing up, there was nothing more disgusting to me than a rare piece of meat that when you cut into it, the juices oozed out. I got older, I said, it's not so bad, right? But I remember being young, and that was the vision, right? Oh, it's blood. That's not blood. It's not blood. It's juice, right? It's blood. All right. So whatever. So that's we have a little bit of an aversion to that. But what does blood represent?
Right.
Well, why are we not allowed to eat blood, to consume blood? It's a better word. Why are we not allowed to consume blood? Because it's disgusting? It's not the reason. I mean, I imagine it's disgusting, but...
What do the Africans do? Maasai, yeah. Maasai tribe drink it as part of their ritual.
I am sure there are people in this world who drink blood ritually,
Because if it's supposed
right?
to
And I'm not talking about the vampires, right? Right. But I'm sure there are people in this world whose practice has them drinking blood ritually, but we don't.
because it's antithetical to life. In other words, it's viewed
Or
as
it's
the
opposite.
opposite.
I would say just the opposite of that.
Right,
In other words, just the opposite.
But when it's spilt, it's not life.
Well, that's true, but it says
Okay.
ki hadam hu hanefesh.
What is there?
The Torah tells us ki hadam hu hanefesh. Blood, the blood is the soul. It is the way to understand it. It means that the blood is the. It doesn't say neshama. Be careful. It doesn't say neshama. It doesn't say ki hadam hu haneshama. Neshama is something else. Neshama is this part that comes from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the soul. Ki hadam hu hanefesh is better translated as the blood is the life force.
Right, so that's
Right?
only God's realm.
Blood represents the life force within any within any living thing that has blood, right? Within every creature, right? There are things that are living that don't have blood, but within every living thing that has blood, right? The blood is the life force. If you would take the blood out of that creation, the creation would no longer be alive, right? Now, as a result of that, my apologies. Okay, let's see. Are we still recording? Yes, hopefully. As a result of that, when we avoid blood out of respect for the fact that the blood being the life source of this creature, the blood needs to be treated with a certain degree of respect. And consuming it is considered inappropriate, right? It's considered inappropriate. It's not considered respectful of the nature of the sanctity of the blood, right? Respecting the blood as the life force, and therefore we're not allowed to consume it.
But you've
How-
given it a negative connotation. In other words, it's a form of defilement. It's not a form of sanctity. So when we come in contact
Well, what's this
with
blood
blood,
is a blood? What do you mean blood is?
in other words, when we come in contact with blood, we're not pure anymore.
That's
we
not
have
true.
To, well,
You're talking about a woman.
yes.
Okay, that's a whole different issue. All right, that's a whole different. We let's just. Okay.
Korbanot.
Okay.
But that's what we learn.
All right, make yourselves comfortable. No, right? So the idea, right? Let's hold on. I'm going to come to that in a second. The idea, I mean, blood in general Blood in general does not make a person tummy. So for instance, if you cut yourself, you're not tummy. If you are, operating on someone, you're not tummy, right? That blood does not make you tummy. Did you ever bite your lip, right? And you're probably consuming your own blood in the process. You're not tummy from doing that, right? You're not tummy from doing that. Blood per se, blood from a living person does not create tuma. There is one exception to that, and that is the exception of a woman, right? And not all blood from a woman creates tuma, right? But blood that represents the potential of life creates tuma. That's the difference. Blood that represents the potential for life creates tuma. It is the blood that lines the wall of the uterus in preparation for the implanting of a fertilized embryo. Or maybe is that a fertilized egg, right? An embryo. All right. First comes the egg, right? An embryo, right? A fertilized egg. And if that doesn't happen, then the body rids itself of that excess blood. That blood represents a potential for life. It's that potential of life that's lost that creates the tuma. It happens to be blood. But if a woman were bleeding from an injury in the same area, it would not create tuma. Right? It would not be it would not create a problem of nida or tuma or anything like that. You have a question?
Yeah, why is a woman tummy after she gives birth? And she's in fact just.
So it's a very good question. All right, why is, and we just read about it in Tazria, right? That a woman is tme'ah for a certain number of days. More for a girl than for a boy. Double the amount, right? 33 for a boy and 66 for a girl, I think. You'll check me on that. All right. Why is that? I mean, hey, you just gave birth to a baby. So I don't speak from experience. I'm not speaking from experience here. But there are those who explain that by saying that there is actually a sense of loss when a woman gives birth. What does that mean? That a minute ago, this life was within her. She felt this life within her. And now that she has given birth, she has experienced the loss of that life within her. Yes, she has a baby, Baruch Hashem, and that offsets it, but nevertheless, she has experienced that loss of life within her. Okay? Whether, right? Now, I'm just, right? I'm just saying that that's the way in which it's explained. Now, why double for the birth of a girl? Why double? Because not only is she experiencing her own loss of life with this girl, but she understands that one day this girl will have her own Emir Hashem loss of life. So it's sort of like in other words, she's experiencing a double loss of life, if you will. And that's why it's, according to her, Rav Hirsch, who says that's why it's double the amount of time for a girl as opposed to a boy. But again, you're right. There is a birth. There's not a loss of potential life, but there is a feeling within a woman, I am told, right, that there is, right. I don't know if it's connected to postpartum depression. I think postpartum depression is more of a hormonal kind of thing, but it could very well be that the hormones are triggering these feelings, right? We don't know what triggers feelings. That sense of loss that a woman might have might be caused by hormones. I don't know. Again, out of my area of expertise, but so blood under those conditions causes tuma, but blood under normal conditions does not cause tuma. However, blood does need to be treated respectfully, right? Blood does need to be treated respectfully. And that there is a special significance to blood that comes out of the body after a person has passed away, right? So for instance, you want to donate blood, you can donate all the blood you want, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And yes, there's going to be a little bit of blood that gets discarded because there's always a little bit of blood left in the, in the tube after the bag is filled. There's still blood in the tube. There's blood on the needle, right? So there's going to be blood that gets discarded. It's not a problem. However, after a person dies, all of the blood that is still in the body or that has come out after a person has died needs to be buried together with the person. And this is why you have pictures and why you see images of people cleaning up, trying to absorb blood that has, God forbid, in a terrorist attack, right? That there's a whole team of individuals, Zaka, that part of their responsibility is to not only retrieve body parts, which unfortunately sometimes happens, or retrieve pieces of flesh that sometimes happens, but also to retrieve any blood that can be soaked up. And this is a very important thing that a Chevra Kadisha needs to be aware of, and it's actually a very important thing that we need to be aware of when we have a relative that passes away in the hospital. Because it's very likely that when the nurses are disconnecting all of the attachments to an individual, that there is blood which is seeping out. And what is a nurse's first reaction, first response to that? Her initial reaction is to take a piece of gauze and to soak it up and to discard it. And we need to say, no, please don't discard that, all right? Right, please don't discard that. We need to bury the individual with that. And if there's blood on the bed sheets, we don't know. That blood could be from when the person was still alive, or it could be from after the person passed away. We bury those bed sheets, with it, with the individual as well. And even in a terrorist attack, if there are blood stains on something, that something will be buried. Pieces will be cut out and it will be buried. Those pieces will be buried. That's because they're considered pieces of an individual, right? And pieces of an individual, the blood, the essence of an individual needs to be buried, which could take us, but won't, into a discussion about amputation. In other words, if a person has a limb amputated, or a person has a gallbladder removed, right? Does that limb or does that gallbladder need to be buried? Right? Does it need to?
Does it need to be buried with you?
Right? Does it need to be buried with you? Does it? Can you bury it somewhere else? I mean, these are all interesting questions, right? The short answer is yes for the limb, no for the gallbladder. Right? Yes for the limb, no for the gallbladder, but without, you could give a whole shear on these kinds of things.
Heart replacement.
Okay. Back to Chumash. Okay, so these are just interesting things. Since Hadam hu hanefesh, since the blood represents the life force, so sprinkling of the blood on the Mizbeach, in other words, taking the blood and using it as part of the ritual, makes perhaps a little bit more sense to us. Because we are essentially taking the life force of this animal and directing it in a manner of Kedusha. And if the animal is considered in place of the person, and we know that there was an element of karbanos that represented that instead of the individual bearing the punishment, or instead of the individual losing his life, the animal lost its life to try to reinforce within the individual the vulnerability of life, the fragility of life, and therefore the sprinkling of that blood, or the pouring of the blood on the Mizbeach, as messy as it might have seemed, was nevertheless something that represented an essence of the carbon, an essence of the process. That blood sprinkled, or that blood poured, or that blood splashed on the Mizbeach represented this issue. There's actually an interesting side discussion, which we're not going to get into either, and that is, how did they keep the Beis Hamikdash clean? Right? There was a lot of blood stains. Right? How did they keep the Beis Hamikdash clean? So they actually used to whitewash the Beis Hamikdash multiple times a year to clean it. And then there were also channels in the Beis Hamikdash, and they used to wash the blood that they could, out of the Beis Hamikdash. So it was a complicated procedure, and that's also why among the miracles that are listed in the Beis Hamikdash was that there were never any flies in the Beis Hamikdash.
So what was the attitude? This is what I'm having trouble with. In order to get the blood that is holy, you had to kill the animal, correct?
Well, yeah, you do have to kill the animal to get the
Right.
blood. That's correct.
Okay. So you have to kill.
But you're
the-
not killing the animal just to get the blood. You're killing the animal as part of the sacrificial ritual.
Right. So then all the parts of the animal become holy.
That's correct. Now, some of them have to be burned on the mizbeach.
Right.
Some of them can be eaten. In other words, there's different levels of
Right.
holiness.
But when someone dies, that body becomes a source of truma, right?
Tuma.
Tuma,
Correct.
correct?
That's correct.
So that is, and that can be extended, that sin on you can be extended through by touching it. By
In
touching
other
the
words,
dead body.
you can contract tuma
Tuma.
by touching that dead body or by being in proximity
Right.
to that dead body.
But the blood would not be of that person who's died? That would not be?
Are you asking
Tuma?
me if the blood of a person who has died can create tuma? The answer
Right.
is yes,
Yes.
it can.
So where is the line in terms of the philosophy behind this? What is this trying to teach us in terms of how we approach death? Is death a spiritual elevation? And if it would be, then this would not be a contamination or
So,
tumor.
okay, so
so
all right.
I'm trying to get a
I
feel
hear
of
I hear
this.
the issue. I'll take a stab at it. If you're not happy,
That's okay.
we're going to go back, but I'll take a stab at it. I think part of the problem is that we associate tuma negative tuma has a negative connotation to us. Look at the words that we use. Look at the words that you just used. Contamination, defilement, right? That's how we understand tuma. That's part of the problem in translating tuma. Even saying ritual impurity. Impurity has a moral connotation to it as well. Impure is like bad, right? None of those are accurate translations of the concept of tuma. Tuma essentially means that an individual is distanced from sanctity. That's what it
The
means.
sanctity of the.
An individual is distanced. When an individual becomes tameh, he or she is now distanced from kedusha, from spirituality. Meaning, when I'm tameh, I can't come into the Beis Hamikdash. Right? When I'm tameh, I can't bring a carbon. When I'm tameh, other things apply. Right? So what is that idea? All of tuma that we have is associated with death. And since death is the exact opposite of what we value in Judaism, when we are exposed to death, translate that as when we become tameh, when we are exposed to death, when we become tameh, so it is a shock to our system. And to be able to connect to Kedusha requires a period of rehabilitation before that can happen. Okay? And it requires immersion in a mikveh. I mean, a person became tameh, they would have to immerse in a mikveh. Today, the concept of mikveh we just applied to women following nida. But when the laws of Tuma and Tahara were observed when there was a Beis Hamikdash, so people had mikvaos in their home, right? You go, excavations, lots of excavations in Israel will reveal literally mikvaos in a person's home.
But
And
men also go to mikvah.
but men go to mikvah for non
Tuma reasons.
No, that,
Well, I want to be careful.
Yeah.
Men go to mikvah.
To become holy.
Thank you. Right. Men go to mikvah. It's more of less of an obligation and more of an adopted practice,
Uh-huh.
Become holy.
right? Or more of an adopted practice.
Because before the High Holy.
Before Rosh Hashanah, before Yom Kippur, okay. Sometimes after intimacy, there are people who will go to the mikvah.
Or before Shabbat.
Before Shabbat, there are people who go to the mikvah.
So whose blood and whose dead body counts? Like
This is a
Person to
never-ending
person?
well.
Okay,
animal,
so
mosquito?
a dead body creates tuma, whether it is a Jewish dead body or a non-Jewish dead body. They both create tuma. The difference is that a Jewish body creates tuma both by touch and in proximity, meaning ba'ohel, in an enclosed space, whereas a non-Jewish body does not create tuma, only creates tuma by touch, not in an enclosed space. But dead animals also create tuma.
all animals? Mosquito? Ants?
That's not an
But
animal.
this is an adjacent place, mikdash,
But
Correct.
what
Well,
counts
correct.
as an animal? Does it have to be a sacrifice?
Mm-mm.
Or
That's a good question.
No,
making sure.
an animal that has died in a non-ritualistic way creates tuma, right?
if you kill it or if it's
Okay, we're gonna stop here. Let's get back. All right, let's come back here. Right, let's come back here. You can swat mosquitoes. It's a mitzvah, right? You can swat mosquitoes. It's a mitzvah. You can kill bees. It's a mitzvah.
no, not honeybees.
If it's dangerous,
Not
if the animal,
honeybees.
not honeybees. Don't kill.
They
Ask
are
the bee what
endangered
kind of bee it is
species.
before you swat it. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go. So back to Chumash. So pasuk Dalid says, "V'lakach Elazar haKohen midama be'etzba'o." In other words, he collects. Right, the dam was collected in a kli, in a utensil. Right, it had to be collected in a particular way, literally with the right hand of the Kohen who was collecting the dam in the kli, and Elazar would put his finger into the kli, into the utensil, and he would then take his finger out, v'hizah, and he would sprinkle it, whatever blood was left on his finger, he would sprinkle it, el nochach pnei ohel moed, right, in the direction of the ohel moed, right, we have our maps, he would have to face so he could see the door of the ohel moed, the entrance, and he would sprinkle the blood that way, and he would do it sheva midama sheva pe'amim, 7 times. He would do it 7 times. We have this theme of 7 sprinklings. We have it multiple times in Chumash. We have it by Yom Kippurim. That's what I mentioned. Achas, achas, v'achas. Achas v'sheva is the last one, 7 times. We have it 7 times here. We have it by the Mitzorah as well. What does 7 symbolize? So you all know, right? 7 symbolizes a sense of completion. 7 days of the week, 7 years of the Shemitah cycle, 7 Shemitah cycles in the Jubilee. All right, 7 signifies that cycle of completion. So he would sprinkle the blood 7 times in the direction of Yerushalayim. Which finger would he use? He would use the forefinger of his right hand. He would use the forefinger of his right hand, and that's how he would sprinkle the blood. If he was a lefty, I don't know what he would do, but he would.
Can a Kohen be lifted?
Can a Kohen be a lefty?
No,
Oh,
you're
you
right.
can? Oh,
No.
I don't know.
Well, you're saying if a Kohen is a lefty, can he officiate? In other words, can a Kohen be a lefty is not a question,
Oh, it's
because
just the Kohen
that's a
right
matter
hand.
of birth. The question is, can a Kohen who is a lefty use his left hand?
Well, that was the question.
Right. Yes. Right. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, right? I don't know. There's it's an interesting question because it refers to the question of if you're a lefty, which hand do you hold your Kiddush cup in? Right. If you make Kiddush and you're a lefty, do you hold your Kiddush cup in your left hand or do you hold your Kiddush cup in your right hand?
What's the answer?
Because
You can't do this to
in
us.
many
You have to tell us.
cultures, the left is, sinistra. It's
Right,
always
sinister, right.
The negative.
Yeah,
The left.
Rachamim, the right is Rachamim, right?
So the halach is if you're a lefty, you can hold the Kiddush cup in your left hand.
Mitzvah mitzvahs for the, you always have to use the right, is that what it is? When you
Well,
shake
we
the
give
Lulav?
we give priority to the right, right? Because we talk about Yamin Hashem, the right of Hashem. We give priority to the right. When the Kohen had the oil of anointment sprinkled on him, it was sprinkled on his right ear, his right thumb, and his right big toe. Right? And if we ever get to Vayikra, we'll learn through those things. Right? We'll learn through those things. So if not, you'll sign up for the class in the Olam HaEmes. We'll have a class there. We'll Emir Hashem talk about it.
No, I'm just thinking the right, so
Make
I'm a
it
lefty,
Thursday.
right? And I know that when you do the esrog, I switch actually, I do the opposite. So when do I use my right hand? For what mitzvah when I use my right hand? I mean, we do Shema with our right hand, but I think that's because we
You're,
learn how to do that
wait,
in
you're
school.
saying, when you take lulav and esrog,
I do the opposite though.
Yeah, my kids
Everybody
do the
else takes
opposite
it in one
also.
hand, I do it the
Yeah.
opposite.
so you hold the lulav in your
Whatever
left
the book
hand
says,
and the esrog in your right hand,
Yeah, that's what I think what Art Scroll says to do.
if you're a lefty.
Yeah, I am a lefty, I'm totally a lefty.
My girls do the same, they're both lefties.
They're both lefties.
Am I telling you something you don't know? I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I never thought
will
about it.
check
I actually never thought about a lefty holding a lulav and esrog. I thought about a lefty doing kiddush. I've actually
What hand
research
do you
that.
hold the esrog in?
normally your left hand.
I hold
You hold it in your
it.
right
And I
hand.
think that's because the book says so. It's on tape, so I hope
Right.
I.
Oh, could be. Could be. I actually never thought about it, but it's a good point. And your girls do it also, so it seems that it might be something worth exploring.
Which we will do right now.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so while that's being looked up, we'll continue with, so the idea is he would sprinkle the blood 7 times in the direction of the Ohel Moed, okay? And then what would happen? What would happen after the sprinkling? I just want to read ahead for the next pasuk, pasuk hey. V'saraf es hapara le'enav, then the heifer, the para, would be burned le'enav, in front of him. Es ora ve'es bisara ve'es dama al pirsha yisrof. The skin, the flesh, the blood, and the waste all have to be burned, right? All have to be burned. So what does that, right? What happens? So imagine, right? This you slaughtered this para in this, this pit that was dug, right? And now a fire is lit in the pit, and the para is placed on top of the fire. Right? Para is placed on top of the fire with everything. You don't take out its organs.
It's an
You-
Ola.
right? Everything is consumed on the fire like a carbon ola. But a carbon ola, the skin is given to the Kohanim, right? Here, everything is consumed on the fire and turned into ash, okay? And it's a good thing to have a lot of wood. You want a very intense fire so that everything is turned into ash. And when everything is turned into ash, I mean, it's interesting because the ashes of the para are going to be mixed together with the ashes of the wood. I don't think you can tell a difference between ashes of para and ashes of wood. All of those ashes were collected. As long as the ashes of the wood were involved in the burning of the para, then they are collected together with the ashes of the para. It all becomes one big pile of ashes. But any wood which was not turned into ash, whereas if you make a fire, sometimes there's wood which is not turned into ash, so that was not collected as part. Right? Just the ashes that were there were collected as part. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Okay. Now, so let's go back now for a second. Everything had to be consumed. Right? Everything had to be consumed. If you'll notice, the word saraf is mentioned twice in verse 5. it says Visarafes hapara le'enav, right? The para should be burned. He should burn the para le'enav, in front of him, and then the skin, the flesh, the blood, and the waste, Yisrof, he shall burn. So why is the phrase twice in the pasuk? Why does it say it has to be burned twice?
So it's not just burned to death, it's consumed.
No, and the animal's dead already.
Oh.
We slaughtered the animal. The animal is dead. We wouldn't put a live animal on. Right? The animal is slaughtered already. All right, so the animal is dead. So the Baal HaTurim points out that there are two ways in which to burn this carcass. The carcass can be burned by putting the entire carcass on the fire, or that's the preferable way to do it, or the carcass, sometimes if the para is big, that might not be so easy to do. So,
Divided?
right, so it can be divided as long as everything is put on the pyre, if you will. As long as everything is put on the pyre to be burned. So that's why it says saraf twice in the verse, right? That one saraf is referring to the entirety of the carcass, v'saraf es hapara le'enav, and the second saraf is referring to a case where you would cut it up into pieces and then burn those pieces on the pyre. Yes,
So I have a misconception. So how was this animal killed? Shut?
it was shechted.
In the
But it
pit.
doesn't say that.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
It
it
says it earlier. It says it.
That's what I don't know where I missed that.
It says it earlier. The end of verse 3.
Okay.
V'shachat osa lefanav. V'shachat osa lefanav. All right. Now, interesting, since Beverly mentioned that, here it says at the end of verse 3, it says v'shachat osa lefanav, that he shall slaughter it lefanav. Lefanav we interpret as, what's the English? In his presence. And then look in at the end of, or look in verse 5, it says, and he shall burn, someone shall burn the cow before his eyes. What's the difference between lifanav, in his presence, and le'enav, before his eyes? The Torah is using two different terms here. So the Torah Tamima says they're both referring to the same thing. And what is that? In other words, neither one is to be taken literally, but they're both referring to the same thing. The Torah Tamima brings a reference to the Gemara in Maseches Yuma that says that the Kohen who is supervising is not allowed to be mesiach da'ato. He's not allowed to be distracted from the ritual that is unfolding in front of him. He has to be focused on that ritual. Can't have his cell phone going off, right? Can't be checking his email. He has to be focused on that ritual. That's what both of these expressions mean. Lifanav and le'enav, the Torah Tamima says, both mean the same thing, meaning that it has to be with his undivided attention. Interestingly, undivided attention is something which is very rare these days, right? Very, very rare these days to have undivided attention to a task, to any task. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the, what the Torah is telling us is that undivided attention is a good thing. We have a more modern phrase for undivided attention. What is it?
Distracted.
No, that's the opposite.
Concentration.
Mindfulness. Right? Mindfulness is today what used to be referred to as undivided attention. Mindfulness means that you are paying attention to what you are doing. So someone showed me this app. I don't know what Pomdura is. Does that make sense to you? It's a timer app that, like when I was growing up, we used to have this little white timer,
Yes.
right? That you
Close
would
down
turn,
timer, like
all right,
that.
and you would tick, 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 tick. Right? Today, I don't think anybody uses
They use
those.
the Fitbit.
Anybody uses those timers anymore? What?
Kitchen timer.
A kitchen timer. I know today we use our ovens, we use our watches, our phones, whatever, right? But the idea is that for 20 minutes you focus undivided attention on a task. and then when the timer goes off, you spend 5 minutes being distracted, and then you go back another 20 minutes to focus on this task. It's to help you concentrate, to help
So
you
it's an
focus
exercise.
on a task.
It's a mental exercise.
Right. Some people say that ticking actually helps you to focus on the task, whatever it is. Some people listen to it, some people silence it, whatever. But the idea is that you focus on the task at hand and try not to get distracted until the timer goes off, when you allow yourself to get distracted. And the reason for that is because a little distraction, there have been studies of how long it takes a person to refocus after a person is distracted. So if you're reading something and your computer buzzes because you got an email and you get distracted, it takes a certain amount of time until you can refocus to the level at which you were focused before the distraction.
But Rabbi, the point I was making was, we think of distractions as related to all the devices and noises we have. Why, at this moment, at this time in the Bible, did God need to
People
say-
always got distracted. Right? People always get distracted.
That's my point. It has
Right?
nothing
Yeah,
to do
you can,
with
right, correct.
Buzzers and beepers
Correct.
and
You can
maybe-
listen, you can be distracted with
Right.
absolutely no electronics around you. It's easy to be distracted.
That's the point. This is a
Right? It's easy to be
human
distracted.
condition.
Just ask my
It's
wife
not
about trying to have a
something-
conversation with me. Right? There could be nothing around and she's like, "Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Hello?" Right? So you can get this, a thought comes into you, right? A thought comes into your mind, and you, instead of letting the thought go, which is what you're supposed to do, you focus on the thought. And you said what? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Whatever, right? That's right. That's right. That's what it's about. So the Kohen needed to have he needed to be mindful, we'll put it in modern terminology. The Kohen needed to be mindful all the time of the ritual that was unfolding in front of him. He needed to focus on that. And so that's what the Torah Tamim says. But others understand it differently. Others say lifanav, literally before him. When the animal was slaughtered, the Kohen was standing right there. Why? Because the blood, he needed to capture the blood. You can't capture the blood if you're standing over there. You have to be standing right where the slaughtering was taking place. That's lifanav. What is le'enav? Le'enav signifies more of a distance. In other words, he didn't have to, when the animal was being burned, he didn't have to stand right there. He could stand at a distance and watch the burning. Why? So, why? Because of all the smoke. In other words, did you ever, if you've barbecued, you know that Hashem created barbecues in such a way so that wherever you are standing, that's
Blows in
where
your face.
that's where the smoke goes, right? Or if you ever at a fireplace, that's exactly wherever and you move to the other side, all of a sudden the wind's blowing that way. So the idea was that the Kohen could be at a distance where he would not be, he would not have to be exposed to the smoke other than to see it. He could be at a distance, and that's le'enav, signifying a little bit further away. Not distracted, mind you, right? But nevertheless a little bit further away, as opposed to lifanav, the shechita. That shechita actually took place right in front of him. Oh, I'm really sorry. That shechita actually took place right in front of him. Okay? Stop here for today. Im Yirtzeh Hashem, see you all next week.